Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be quite a fun webinar today. I'm glad to see the people that are in here. I hope you guys are having a good experience with the color so far. Thanks for joining us again today. Just a reminder, if you are on a computer, you are going to see on the left-hand side, you're going to see a chat window. I'll type something in real quick. And if you can do me a favor as we go through this webinar, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those into the chat area on your left-hand side, and then also I'll be able to look at those and answer them. We have started a new webinar series here that I think you guys are really going to love. We actually have broken things down so we only cover one or two things at a time. Makes it a lot easier to remember a lot of information, and it lets us get in more detail specifically on what we're doing. For some of you guys I see on the webinar today, I think you guys are really going to like this, and it'll be a little bit of an extension of a class, of a live class we did with you guys on making more colors and understanding exactly how you can actually make any single color that is out there. So hopefully this is exciting for everyone, and you guys will have a good time. Again, if you guys can do me a favor now, if you're on a computer, just go ahead and type the number 1 into the chat window and hit enter, and that way I know that you guys are on and can hear me. Awesome, excellent. You guys are quick, very quick. Um, so today we want to start off. I know when we did the class, we always talk about this, that there's no such thing as like a wrong formula. It really has to do that if you don't get a formula that you like, it just means that it's the wrong formula for your current needs, or it's a formula that doesn't meet your current needs. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad formula, because it could be a great formula for somebody else. So what we like to do when we're creating colors or doing certain kind of processes that are outside of the norm, we like to write things down, and not necessarily write them down. We can text them to ourselves on our phone, or I use an app called Evernote that allows me to take notes on everything, takes pictures, and keeps it all together. So if I ever want to make a certain color again, I've taken a picture of that model or that swatch, and I have the typed in information on how I got that color. So once again, check out Evernote. It's a free app that you can get for your iPhone or your Android phone, and it's kind of cool for stylists to have because you can keep a lot of information in there. We want to keep in mind that all of our clients are different people, and they all have different needs. So that's how the formulas are going to get different. So in this example here, if I wanted to make these two models, let's say a purple mahogany color, like a really nice purple mahogany color, I'm going to use two different formulas on these two people to try and get to the same place. Uh, Sometimes in our rush to formulate something, we don't realize, or we forget that there are many ways to get to the same place. So there are many different roads that can lead to the colors that we want to get to. So one of the things that we really want to start off with is doing a preliminary evaluation on our model or client. Okay. Um, what the natural level is, and getting to how we're going to get to the desired level that we want. And it's really simple, but we want to make sure that we really follow through on this. So if our start level is a level 3, we need to get 3 levels of lift. We know that we're going to have remaining pigment that's red. Okay, and for this person, they've got 0 gray coverage. Now, simple stuff first, and then we'll get into the more complicated things. Uh, Basically, if I'm going to counteract the remaining pigment that's going to be left over, which is going to be red, because I want a more neutral look, I'm going to add 37 green amplifier into my formula. Okay, because remember, I'm starting at a level 3, I'm lifting to a level 6. My underlying pigment is going to be really, really warm. Okay, so just off the bat, I know I'm going to use green in my formula somehow to make it neutral, because those are going to counteract. We'll talk about how much to use a few slides down from here, but basically we want to get those concepts in first, right? Now let's say I didn't want to uh, I didn't want to neutralize it. I actually want to make a really vibrant red, right? I know my underlying pigment is going to be red, so I'm going to choose target a target shade that is going to be a red already. So something like a 4.6, right? Or I'm sorry, a 6.6, 5.6. I'm going to use, and then if I want to make it even more red, I'm going to add the 66 red amplifier to the formula. Again, pretty basic, but we have to build in small blocks, right? And we'll get to the fun stuff in a second. So now, what if I want to use that underlying pigment, but I don't want it to be red? I want it to be purple, and I'm kind of a fan of purple colors right now. So you'll see a lot of examples in this webinar that talks about purple, right? Um, if I want to make purple, um, the best way to uh, to do it in this situation would be to use that red underlying pigment as part of my formulation. So I've got already a pop of color in there that I can use. Um, you know, I'm going to use a mahogany shade because a mahogany shade is going to have red and blue in there already. So it's going to give me something more on the purple side, and I'm going to be able to add the 22 violet amplifier um, to that to make it even more purple. Now, again, we haven't talked about it yet, but remember, guys, that we can affect how much remaining pigment is going to be there, how much lift we're going to get, and how much deposit, not just by the colors that we use, but also the developers that we use. If everybody understands so far, go ahead and type a 1 into the chat window. And if you have any questions, type a 2. Awesome. Excellent. So we want to remember mass day hair colors match natural hair levels. So we call them reflective hair color, right? So they're not going to look that dark matte color that you're going to get from some of these color lines that make these fashion, we'll call them fashion colors, right? Sometimes when you look at those colors, they're very, very solid and look like candy. Um, with ours, you're still going to get a natural reflective look that is going to be really, really nice, especially in the sun. So when their purplish mahogany hair hits the sun, you're going to see a lot of reflection in there. Okay. Um, Now the next thing to keep in mind is that based on the colors, um, depending on where you're starting out, you're going to have a different amount of alkalinity in the color, okay? And the alkalinity is going to help you to get the lift. So, for example, on an extreme, and you guys will understand this, a 1.07, so a level 1, is not going to give you a lot of lift, right? It's not going to give you any lift at all. A level 6 is going to give you more lift than a level 1, and a level 11 is going to give you the most lift, okay? Where you want to use this is in situations like what we just talked about. Um, we're trying to lift 3 levels. Maybe we use the target level that we're trying to get to. So let's say a level 6, right? But maybe we want more of that underlying pigment to come out. Maybe we want more red coming in there. So maybe we use a higher level. All right. So you want to remember, different clients, their hair reacts to things in different ways. So, for example, it's very easy to lift my first client's hair, but my second client, it's a lot harder to lift. We had a little, just go ahead and type in 1 if you can still hear me. Sorry about that. Excellent. So, what we want to keep in mind is these situations where you have the ability to control how much lift and how much deposit you're going to get, not just by the colors you choose, but by the developers and the levels of colors that you choose. Okay. So remember, a level 8 is going to lift a lot more than a level 5. More lift is going to give you more remaining pigment. Okay. And the same is true in the opposite. So darker colors have more pigment in them, so you're going to get more coverage, while lighter colors have less pigment, so you're not going to get the coverage or the tone that you need. And this totally makes sense if you think about it, right? A level 1 is darker than a level 11. So it's going to be easier to cover something with a level 1 than a level 11. Go ahead and type a 1 in there if these two concepts have made sense. Awesome. Excellent. So where does this matter most? Okay, this is going to be a little tip, not too much to do with what we have going on in this webinar today, but definitely will help you with toning your blondes after you've lifted them. Okay, we always recommend that if once you're going to tone your blondes, even if you've lifted them up until level 10, level 11, that when you make your toner formula, you're using a level 9, so a 9.2. That's going to help you to counteract that underlying yellow the most. And the reason why that is because is going to be because of this situation right here, okay? Where a level 11 is going to have almost no pigment left in it because you're just using it for a lot of lift, but a level 9 is going to have more of that violet pigment to tone out that yellow, okay? So hopefully that's a good tip and you guys enjoy that one. And you guys are probably already doing that now, but if you haven't, it's definitely one to try. Um, More pigment is going to equal to better coverage and better toning, and it's all for the reasons that we just talked about. Now, this one is pretty self-explanatory too. You'll see how all these things come together in a minute. Uh, Level 10 is going to give you less lift than using a 60 volume. So I'm sorry, 10 volume developer is going to give you less lift than using a 60 volume developer. 60 volume is going to provide you with the ability to lift the most possible. And again, you want to make sure that you don't use that with any other hair color, as 60 volume is only something that we recommend that you use with the Mass Day hair color, and it's based on the ingredients that are in there. So as an example, we always talk about how you can get healthier looking blondes with an 11 series and 60 than you would with using bleach and 20. And it really just comes down to the chemistry of what's in the products. You know, again, in this situation, the reverse is also the same. So you're not going to want to deposit with a high volume developer because you're going to be getting too much lift. You're going to want to deposit with your 10s and your 20s, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so let's take a look at our tonal values real quick. You guys should know these. Knowing these 9 tones lets you understand all 100 tonal values that are out there. Okay, and you'll see how we use these in a second. The ones I particularly want you guys to pay attention to right now would be that first column. So the point O, you see it's kind of like a light bluish violet. Our point 3, which is in yellow, which is our gold, and our point 6, which is in red. Now, by understanding the color wheel, we understand that when you mix these primary colors, right, the yellow, the red, and the blue that are located in these 3 spots here, you're going to make a brown. And that corresponds to where those point numbers land on the color wheel. So again, you look at this color wheel, we have our point 3 up in the yellow, our point 0 in that neutral blue, and our point 6 in the red. Go ahead and type 1 if everybody understands where that's at. And if you think this is helpful when you're thinking about formulating all your other colors, right? Having this little guide to tell you where all these colors lie really helps you to understand how you can make any color and mix it. And you'll see the amplifier one in a second, which is going to be pretty good. So when you look at all the 24 pre-mixed tonal options, if you just know the first 9, right, you can figure out what all these are, because If you know point 0.3 is gold and you know point 0.5 is mahogany, then you know that a 0.35 is a gold mahogany. And what you want to pay attention to in this situation too, that'll help you to formulate the custom colors that you want to make, is that first number after the dot is going to be 2/3 of the tonal value that's in that color. Okay. And the second number is only going to be 1/3 of the tonal value in that color. So for example, if I wanted to use a 0.35, but I wanted it to be more mahogany, right? I would want to add more point 0.5 to that to make it more mahogany. Totally makes sense. Um, we just have to think about it in those terms when we're trying to formulate for our customer. Okay. As you can see in the color book, you can see that on the left-hand side, we have our levels. On the top, we have all those pre-mixed tones. But the reason why this is on here is you see all those empty little spots? You can formulate to make any of those empty little spots by just knowing those 9 numbers. Because once you know those 9 numbers, you know how you can mix to get into any of those in between spots. Okay? Go ahead and type in a 1 if you're still with me and it makes sense. Awesome. Excellent. Now, this little color chart is a little more exciting too because we start to put in all 24 of the premix tones in there, and you start to see where they lie on the color wheel, so that way you can kind of see how to mix these colors to make anything that you want. Again, you'll start to notice our 0.0, our 0.3, and our 0.6 are still in the same spots, but then you start to see where our 0.1 lies. Um, now, Laura has a quick question about, do we have a small chart of the main 9 numbers available? We do, Laura, and what I will do is after this class, I'll go ahead and I'll send a link to it on the massdayhaircolor.com website. Not only do we have a little chart with the 9, right? But it's a PDF file that you can download. You can also view it online. It has the 9 main numbers, and then the 24 premix shades on the bottom. There you have the numbers, but you don't have the tones, and it's kind of like a little test to give yourself so that you can learn how to put these things together. Okay, and I will go ahead and I'll send that out, and I'll put it up on Facebook and Twitter and hopefully Instagram after our meeting. Awesome, excellent. So as you guys can see here on this color wheel, you can see where all of these colors lie, right? Um, one of the things that you want to remember before we go into this next section is that uh, when you're looking at hair color, there's always, even in your blondest blondes, when you're formulating, in reality, you're always trying to make a brown color. It just depends on how light you're trying to make it, and we'll talk about that in a second. Tint backs are quite interesting, and it's one of the things that we find that Master Hair Color does probably better than any other hair color that's out there on the market. Um, Go ahead and type in a 1 if you've used the tint back formulas before, or type in a 2 if you have not. Awesome. So we have a little bit of both. Okay. So this should be kind of good. And for you guys that haven't used it yet, um, it's very, very simple to use if you just follow the instructions at the beginning. It tells you exactly how to do them. So, like I was just saying before, no matter what, you're always trying to make a brown color. So we know that red, yellow, and blue are going to make brown, right? We also know that purple, orange, and green are going to make brown. And this is all based on that color wheel that, we should really be familiar and comfortable with so that we can manipulate what we want in the end. Now, we did a bunch of testing a couple of years back, on how to make the best one-step tint back formula possible. What it came back down to was the basics of the color wheel. Now, normally when people talk about a tint back or a dye back, they're talking about someone who, let's say you've had a client and you've bleached their hair for a long time, they've been blonde, or somebody comes in, they have really damaged hair from someone else who had bleached their hair up, and they want to be brown again to look more natural, to have the hair look a little more healthy. Um, the problem with diebacks or tintbacks have always been that they tend to fade faster because the hair doesn't have all the all that it needs in order for it to last longer. Now, there's a couple of issues with that, right? One would be the condition of the hair, right? And two is going to be the actual colors that you use. So normally, in the past, what people would do using any other hair color is they would take the client and they would dye their blonde hair to more of an orange or copper first in the first step, usually with like a demi-permanent. And then they would go ahead and do an all-over color on top of that. Now, if they didn't dye it orange originally, what would happen is when they dyed it the full color, that color would bleed off really, really quickly and fade and really not look attractive at all. By putting in the orange first, they're putting in a filler that acts as like a base for the other colors to go over. Now that can be time consuming. It's also you're using two different processes on a model or on a client, and it really cuts into your day. Do me a favor and type in a 1 if you've ever done a dye back or a tint back like that. Excellent. So now what we wanted to do is we wanted to figure out, okay, how do we make it happen in just one step? Okay. Now, again, we talked about two things, right? Number one being the condition of the hair. If that hair is really damaged, right, then the first thing we would recommend, of course, after you purify the hair with Use Me First to make sure that all of the buildup and toxins are out of the hair, what you can do also is um, do you use the Mass Day Color Protecting Restorative Mask? Go ahead and massage that into the hair and leave it on the hair for 5 to 15 minutes, and then go ahead and rinse that out before you do the color. Now, what sets the the Mass Day Color Protecting Mask apart from any of the other deep conditioners that are out there is that there are no coating agents in our mask. So we are literally trying to help rebuild the hair uh, without any kind of coating agents or anything like that. And the reason why we do it before the color is to help rebuild those bonds in the hair so that when you do color over, it's going to hold better because there's something for the color to hold onto. Um, do me a favor and type in a 1 if you're familiar with a product out there called Olaplex. Excellent. So Olaplex is a product that you can use with bleaches, other color lines. We don't recommend you use it with Mass and I'll explain why in a second. But basically, what it's doing is it helps to rebuild the bonds before you bleach, so that it makes the hair look, feel, and seem healthier after you've done a bleach job, or if you're using a different color line, right? With Mass it's kind of like we have that bond building already built into the color, okay? And if you need more of that bond building, using the mask is going to help do that for you without adding another process or another product to the situation, okay? So using our hair color is like using a different hair color with Olaplex put in when you're talking about trying to rebuild the bonds in the hair. Go ahead and type in a 1 if that makes sense. Excellent. Now, back to the color side, okay? So now we've purified the hair, we've rebuilt it with the mask, and now we want to make sure that the color lasts a long time. So You want to remember, you're trying to make brown, right? So your formula has to have a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of yellow in it, because that's going to help to make the brown that's going to act as a base for your color. And then you want to pick a target level that, or a target shade that is going to be good for your client, or what you're trying, or exactly what kind of shade you're trying to get to. Okay. But we want to do it in one step. So the proportions that we filled out, and you're able to download these sheets. I don't know if any of you guys have downloaded these sheets before, but these are also available online, and I can send a link to those. I'll put them up on Facebook as well. Um, this gives you the exact proportions of what you're supposed to use to get to a tint back that's going to last you longer and make the hair look healthier and more nourished and beautiful. Okay, so first thing you want to do is you want to use a tint back formula if you're gonna go back, if you're gonna dye someone back more than 2 levels. Okay, so if you're going from a level 10 to like a level 8, you can use just your level 8 formula. You're gonna be just fine. But if you're trying to get back down to a level 7, that's when you're gonna want to need more of this. That's a great idea, Allison. We have a few other ones too, other sheets, formulation sheets that you can laminate, and we have they're available to print online, but people put them up in the color room, and it makes it really, really simple to look at everything and how to mix everything. And we are going to have another class, just a little teaser here, specific to formulating uh, semi-permanence, demi-permanence, and all those kinds of things, and we'll walk through those. That's going to be on another day. So keep in mind, we're trying to break everything down into little chunks, so that way it makes it more easy for everybody to understand. So getting back to this tint back. All right, my customer right now, she's been bleached out to around a level 10 or 11, right? She wants to be a level 7. What I want to do is I want to use this formula to get her to look like a 7.34. That's a level 7 chocolate. Okay. Um, Again, I'm going to use my 7.0 as my blue, my 7.6 as my red, my 7.3 as my yellow, and I'm going to use 7.34 as my target shade. Okay. And I'm going to use 10 volume because I'm not looking for any kind of lift. I'm not trying to cover gray or anything. So I'm basically just looking to deposit this color. Okay. But how much am I supposed to use, right? If you look at that last column, it'll tell you the proportions of how much to use. So you're using a half an ounce of 7.0, which is our blue, a quarter of an ounce of 7.6, which is our red, a half an ounce of 7.3, which is our yellow, and then 1 full ounce of 7.34, which is our target shade. Okay? Now you remember, we always want to make, with Naste, we want to make the amount of color be equal to the amount of developer. So when you add up how much color that is, that's 2 1/4 ounces. So I'm going to use 2 1/4 ounces of my 10 volume. And by mixing those two together, I'm going to get the perfect tint back formula. I'm still going to process for 45 minutes. And what's going to happen is I'm going to get very, very good coverage, and it's going to be coverage that makes the hair look like natural hair color. I think Allison, who's on there, she had used this or these tint back formulas before. Can you type a 1 in, Allison, if you did use this type of tint back formula? Excellent. Um, Now, what happens if I'm like a level 10 and I want to be a level 4, right? I want to get really dark or anywhere in between. All you have to do is modify the level of the color that you're using, but everything else stays the same. So I'll walk through this really quickly. So I'm going to use 4.0 as my blue, 4.6 as my red, 4.3 as my yellow, and my target shade is going to be 4.34. and I'm still going to use 10 volume. And if you look in the last column there at the proportions, they still stay the same. I'm using a half an ounce of 4.0 blue, a quarter of an ounce of 4.6, which is my red, a half an ounce of 4.3, which is my yellow, and 1 ounce of 4.34. Total that up, it's going to be 2¼ ounces of color, and I'm going to use that with 2¼ ounces of 10 volume developer. Type in a 1 if that all makes sense. So does anybody have any questions so far just on this tint back formula? Type in a 2 if you don't have a question. Excellent. So basically, what you want to remember is that you should follow these guidelines to the T at first. Okay? So what that means is that when you want to do this tint back to a level 4, just use it the exact way that it's printed on the piece of paper until you get the hang of it. Because once you get the hang of it, then you can start to modify certain things, okay? And I'm just going to give you an example. So I think you guys have seen Brooke before. She's a good model that we like to use because we're able to do a lot with her hair and able to make it really, really beautiful again. Uh, when Brooke came to us this time, she had severe damage from bleach. We needed her to be a rich chocolate for modeling at our trade show booth. Um, and you know, it's quite interesting because when you have models like this, um, sometimes the picture that they send you in their model application doesn't really match what's on their hair at the time that they're gonna come uh, to model for you. So that was one of the situations that we got into with Brooke. And so we were in a situation where we had to figure out how to fix this, right? Now, as you can see, there's already a lot of yellow in that bleached out area. The hair was really damaged, so we did do the restorative mask beforehand. We did the Use Me first and then the restorative mask beforehand. Don't know if you can tell, there's a lot of breakage on those ends. And so what we were trying to do is really first get that hair healthier. So we used the restorative mask. Type in a 1 if you've used the restorative mask before, and hopefully it excellent. Hopefully all of you guys have. Very good. Now, um, what we did for her, seeing how much yellow was already in the hair, right? Um, we modified our formula a little bit. And as you can see, the proportions are still very similar. The only difference is because her hair was a little longer, we needed more color. So Brooke's formula ended up being 2 ounces of 4.34, 1 ounce of 4.0, 1 ounce of 4.6, right? So our 4.0 is going to be our blue. Our 4.6 is going to be our red. She's already got a lot of yellow in that hair, so we didn't have to put any more in. And we used a 4.34 as our target color, okay? And as you can see, when you add that up, it adds up to 4 ounces of hair color. And so we have 4 ounces of 10 volume to do the deposit. Um, Processing time was still only 45 minutes, but we needed to make sure that the application was perfect. When you have situations like this, I'm going to step back here. As you can see, she's got a lot of things going on here. Not only does she have a lot of regrowth, but when the stylist that put these streaks in her hair put them in, um, she missed a lot of places and put it in a lot of places. And so making sure that there's proper coverage on your tint backs is going to be super important. Now, Allison has a good question that she brings up. Did you dry fully before applying? And the answer is no. Okay, so here is the thing. with Mass Day hair color, it is perfectly fine to apply the hair color on towel dried hair. Okay. It doesn't have to be super dry, but it also shouldn't be super wet. So you want to go ahead and towel dry. Some people are some customers, stylists are comfortable with that. Some like to stick them under the hood dryer if you have one for a few minutes, just so that it isn't so damp. Because again, you want it to be towel dried, not soaking wet, right? And think about it this way as well. Uh, when you get a sponge, right? You get a sponge, you buy it at the Walgreens or the CVS, and you take it out of the package and you try to pick up a spill. Right when you use that sponge, it's not going to be very good at picking up the spill, right? But if you run that sponge under water first and wring it out, and then go to pick up the spill, it's going to pick up that water a lot better. We feel the same way about hair and hair color. If that hair has been washed, it's been purified, it's in a state where it's towel dried, it's going to take to the hair color a lot easier than it would on someone who was 100% dry. But it really depends on the stylist. It's still going to work great if the hair is dry. I just wouldn't do it on the hair being soaking wet. Hope that makes sense. Go ahead and type in a one, Allison, if that makes sense for you. Excellent. Um, so as you can see here in Brooks' formula, we had the yellow, so we didn't need to add any more yellow, but we still used the red and the blue. So red and blue and her existing underlying pigment of yellow gave us that brown, and then we really wanted deep chocolate in there, so we've got a lot of 4.34 in there to make it stand out. And as you can see in this before and after picture, it totally makes a difference. Go ahead and hit a one if you like the after, and hit a two if you like the before. Excellent. So as you can see, so I think the after is the winner here. And as you can see, based on how the stylist formulated this, we were able to get still some natural looking light and dark dimension in the final outcome. And this is what we're talking about, the hair not looking flat, right? If you look at Brooke's hair on the right there, it doesn't look flat. It doesn't look like uh, a solid, dirty color, right? It looks like natural hair color, which is always what we're trying to strive for. Now, when you look at the different looks we gave for Brooke, depending on how her hair was styled, it picked up different reflections, and we were able to use that existing problem that she had to benefit her so that it doesn't look like she just has, one solid helmet head color on her head. There's actually vibrancy, there's actually with movement, it picks up light really nicely. And this is the kind of customer that's going to get you a lot of customers. Because if you're able to fix that kind of a problem and come out with an outcome that's going to look really beautiful and soft and natural, you've got a really, really good solution there for yourself. Type in a one if you like how it looks in the after pictures. Particularly take a look at that one on the bottom right, because that one on the bottom right, you can see how the light and shadow picks up. Excellent. Type in a one if you have any clients that end up coming to you with that kind of color correction situation going on. So now, Leanne and Jennifer and Laura, um, and Allison, because you guys sometimes get them worse, right? This kind of formulation can help you take the time that it takes to service this customer down by a whole processing time. So you're jumping away from having to do two different processes to just one, which is going to save you time. At the same time, you're using the restorative mask, so you're rebuilding that hair and making it more healthy. And by using this one-step formula, right, by just following that one-step formula at first, you're going to be able to get really, really nice results that will get you a lot more referral customers as well. Now, we're going to step into, so before I move on to the next level, everybody comfortable with how to do a one-step tint back? Go ahead and type number one if you're comfortable. Awesome. Uh, how many of you guys are going to use this the next time you have to do a tint back and use it exactly the way that it's written on the paper, type of one, if you're going to do that? Awesome. Excellent. And like I said, do it exactly like the paper for the first few times, and then once you get comfortable, you'll start to figure out how to modify from there. But at first, definitely start with that. Now, one of the things that's pretty cool about the color wheel and when it comes to remaining pigment and hair levels is that as you travel from level 1 up to level 9 and up, so like level 10 and 11, right? It actually follows the curve of the color wheel. Okay, and I don't know if any of you guys type in a one if you knew that, a two if you didn't know that, or a three if you don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So this was something that once I actually paid attention to it, like I always knew what the remaining pigments were at each level, but I didn't realize that if I looked at the color wheel, like let's do it together. At at level 1, blue, right? So find the blue color that says just blue. Okay. Type in a one if you're there. Excellent. Okay. So you'll see right next to blue, it says level 1. So that means the remaining pigment at level 1 is blue. You go to level 2, you're going to have blue violet as the remaining pigment. If you go to level 3, you're going to have violet. If you go to level 4, you're going to have red violet. If you go to level 5, you're going to have red. So to make this make sense, right? Let's say I was level 3, natural level 3, and I wanted to be a level 5. Guess what? Red underlying pigment is going to be there. So when I formulate, I have to know that that's what's going to be there. Or else, if I don't, then colors are going to be too warm, unless I want it to be warm, and then I can use that red underlying pigment that's going to be there. Okay, so as you keep traveling up the color wheel, what you notice is, again, level 6 is going to have red orange underlying pigment, level 7 is going to be orange underlying pigment, level 8 is going to be yellow orange, and level 9 is going to be yellow. Level 10 is going to be a paler yellow, and level 11 is going to be almost no yellow. Hit number one if that makes sense now. Awesome, excellent. So how does this make sense to how we formulate colors, right? Especially when we want to make custom colors. And this is something that I think all of you guys will get really, really good at the more you practice. And so I recommend, like when you do haircuts, keep that extra hair. I know that a lot of you guys recycle your hair, right? Um, so that's really good. It's really nice to recycle the hair and send it in so that it can be reused. Keep some of that so that you can do swatch testing. It's actually probably my favorite thing to do with color is trying to figure out how to make different things. And you can really learn a lot from your hair that you're throwing away, so or that you're recycling. So now, remember, we have our color wheel in the middle, right? You still see blue all the way around, and let's always start at blue, right? We see our level 1, we know our underlying pigment is there, and then we see another circle going around on the outside with little numbers. Those numbers are our amplifier numbers, okay? And by learning those 9 basic tonal values that we talked about earlier, right, we know what these amplifier numbers are. Because again, if I'm at blue, level 1, I see 44 is copper, copper. Remember, for us, copper is orange. So I know that whenever I want to counteract a blue, I'm going to use a 44, which is going to a 44 amplifier in my formula. And as you go up, let's jump over to level 5, right? Level 5 red, I know that to make red neutral, I'm going to have to add green, 37 amplifier, because our green is the 37 amplifier. So let's say I have a client who's like a level 3. I'm going to lift them up to around the level 5. I know they're going to be warm. I make their formula and then I add just a little bit. And when I mean a little bit, an eighth of an ounce of 37 amplifier to 2 ounces of the rest of your color formula. Okay, so it's really, really little. But that little bit of green is going to help to tone out any of the underlying red warmth that you don't want. Type in a 1 if that all makes sense. 1.5. Good. I'll give you one more example. Okay. Or actually, you'll get it as we move forward in a second. If you follow this up to like a level 9 or a level 8, you're going to see that there's yellow orange left in there. So you can add '07 and a little bit of 22 into your formula, or just '07, and you're going to be able to counteract that stuff to make it more neutral. So you're trying to get rid of that underlying pigment that makes it too warm, okay? So you're trying to neutralize everything. Now, the opposite is true as well. What if I'm lifting my client who's a level 3 into a level 5 red? I want to use that red underlying pigment, right? So I'm going to lift her up into that area, and if I want it to be even more vibrant, I'm going to add 66 amplifier to it, as you can see. So if you go on this page, you go to the red color, you know you're at level 5, and you're going to add 66 red amplifier. Type in a 1 if that all makes sense. Awesome. So Laura, as you can see, um, it's just basically adding the exact same color if you're going to accent or want to make it brighter, right? And it's adding the opposite color in order to neutralize it. So you have the ability with the amplifiers, adding those to your formula, to be able to do either one. Totally. I totally get that. So when you're using it like this screen right here, it's an amplifier, right? Because it amplifies, it makes it more red, or makes it more gold, or makes it more violet. Okay. When you look at it on this page, it's actually not an amplifier, it's a counteractor. Does that make sense? Excellent. Perfect. So as we keep going, what you want to remember is that there's only a limited amount of amplifiers, so they're really easy to understand. They're located like this in the bottom right-hand side of your color book, okay? And we have the combinations that we have make it so that you can use these together as well in order to um, make other shades as well. So '07 is our deep blue amplifier. 37 is our green amplifier. 22 is our violet. 44 is a copper or deep copper. 64 is a fiery copper, which is a red copper. 66 is an intense red. 67, we call it red cherry, but it's red with blue in it. And 33 is an intense gold. Yes. So Allison makes a great point about when we're talking about lifting. Uh, Underlying pigment is going to show up when you have um, natural virgin hair, right? So when you have natural virgin hair and you're lifting it from level 3 to level 6, you're going to have that red underlying pigment. Now, but this also plays into when you're trying to lift over previously colored hair as well, depending on what kind of color you're using. For example, in and this can be kind of like a teaser into a more color correction type class that we can do later as well. But for example, some colors, uh, some color lines are very, very hard to get out of the hair. Even with bleach, you can't get them out. And so, a simple example of that would be some of these metallic colors that people were putting on their hair for a long time, but now aren't so fashionable, right? But they want to get back to a natural color or something that's more in style now. And it's very, very hard to get some of these colors out without doing a lot of damage with a lot of bleach work, right? So you can use those, what's going to be left over from lifting there. Think about that kind of as underlying pigment. And then when you formulate your colors to color correct someone who has a lot of this stuff going on, um, you can actually formulate something that uses the existing color that won't come off of the hair as part of the base. Type in a 1 if that makes sense. Awesome. Excellent. So, a lot of really cool stuff that you can do once you understand how to use all these colors together. Um, now, this is to your point, Laura. Um, Amplifiers, and that's just the name that we call them, they can be used for two things. They can be used to amplify or add vibrancy, or they could be used for toning or to neutralize, right? So those are two different ways that you can use them. Um, how much you use of the amplifier really depends on what you're trying to do. Now, for this, again, this is one of the things where this could be a good one to print out just to have. You don't have to put it up in the back room, but it's a good one to print out so that you can see how much of the amplifier should I use to do what, right? What you want to remember is, okay, so Laura, this is a great question. Should I use an amplifier or shouldn't I use? And what makes me decide that? So, if I'm going to, I'm going to give you, no, not at all. This is perfect. So, if I'm going to lift someone uh, and I know that they're going to be too warm, right? Because I've lifted them in the past. Have you had any customers before that you lift them into like a level 6 and they're just too warm? They're too, there's too much red in the hair or too much orange in the hair. Type in a 1 if that's happened to you before. Okay, excellent. So when that happens, there's two things you can do, right? You can continue to do that and then try and tone them so you can so that you can, make it more neutral. Type in a 1 if you've done that before. Okay. Adding an amplifier takes away that second step. So when you originally make your formula, you just add a little bit, meaning 1/8 1/8 of an ounce to your formula of green, and it will make it so that when that color processes, it's neutral. So you won't have to tone it anymore. Does that make sense? Okay, excellent. So now on the other end, uh, and that's for using it as a toner, right? Now on the other end, if I want to make it, use it to amplify something as an amplifier, right? Um, I just pick whatever color or whatever tone I want to bring out more of. Okay, so let's say I have someone who I'm lifting into red, or tell me if this has ever happened. Have you had someone that you've lifted into uh like a level 6 red, but it wasn't red enough? Type in a 1 if that's happened to you. Excellent. So if you want to make it more red, you can add amplifier, red amplifier to it to make it more red. And the same rules apply. Uh, the more amplifier you put in, the more tone you're going to get. But at the same time, remember our slides from the beginning, right? Uh, the more tone I put in, the less depth I'm going to get. So I can get it more vibrant red, but it's not going to be as deep. Does that make sense? Type in a 1 if that makes sense. Excellent. So uh, that makes us it like, and again, this is going to be a thing that to fully understand it, you want to take some of your hair and try and dye it different combinations, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. But basically, by knowing how to do this, you can make everything from a vibrant red to a pastel pink based on how much you vary the amount of the base shade and the amount of the amplifier and the developer that you use and how you use the underlying pigment. Exactly. So that's exactly what I'm saying, Allison. The more amplifier you use, right, uh, you're going to start to move away from any kind of coverage that you get proportionally. So we'll answer that in a second. So we've kind of gone over this. So basically, when you're going to use an amplifier, so we talked about that. Um, Color formulations for vibrancy. Okay, and these are easy ones to that just illustrate what we had talked about, and we'll talk about the durability factor in a second, Allison. I'm not forgetting that question, so don't worry. Um, when we use one part of 107 and add a part of oh 07, we're making that black a little bit more blue. We can also add violet to it, and it'll make it a little bit more violet. Okay. Um, in our reds, right? This is amplifying. We're using, if let's say our target is a 7.6 and we add a 66 and we use 30 volume, right? We're adding more red to it, more red to those colors. Uh, Same relationship in our coppers. If we're using an 8.64, we can add, um, our 6.4 amplifier to it, and it's going to give us more red copper in there. And then this is the opposite. So kind of what we were talking about before. When it's not an amplifier anymore, when it's a toner, we can add oh 07, 37, or 22 to our formula, and it's going to help us tone while we lift. So those are the two basic ways to use the amplifier. Does everybody get the concept of the two basic ways? Go ahead and type a 1 if you do. Excellent. Very good. Now, um, classic formula for highlighting, right? Um, Let me know if how many of you guys have used like 11.2 and 60 volume to do highlights on your dark-haired clients before. Go ahead and type a 1 if you have. And by dark hair, I mean like level 6 and below. Okay. So this is one of the cool things that you can do uh, with the color is you can get really nice highlights on dark hair without having to bleach them. Okay. For those of you guys that haven't done it, tell me if this is how you've gotten highlights before. Have you used a bleach to lift them up and then tone them back so that it looks more natural? Type of 1 if you've done that. Okay. So instead of having to do, again, uh, what we try to do is we try and make these solutions for you guys so that it takes less time and you get better results with less damage to the hair. So in this situation, what you're going to see is that you can take 11.2, and I'll give you an actual formula. You can take 2 ounces of 11.2 and 1/8 of an ounce of the 37 green amplifier, and then 2 1/8 of an ounce of 60 volume developer, and you can go ahead and highlight through the dark hair. And what's going to happen is, as it lifts, it's also going to tone it. So on your level 6s and belows, you're going to get natural looking caramel highlights. And depending on how much 37 you put in there will affect the amount of lift that you're going to get. This speaks to your question on durability, Allison. Um, it'll affect the lift, but it'll also affect the tone. So you play with the amount of 37 in there to get the exact result that you want. Type in a 1 if that makes sense. So this is one that we just did we had a class here last week at Mass Day where we had stylists come in and we worked on so many hair swatches. I'll show you a picture of one of the exercises that we were doing. But one of the cool things that we did was we took our every single one of our 11 series, right? So you're talking 11.0, 11.1, 11.2, 11.23, and 11.53. Okay, we took all those 11 series, and then we took swatches that were exactly the same color. They were about between a level 7 and level 8 neutral. Okay, and then we applied formulations for each one of these by themselves. So we had 11, one swatch for each of the 11s. And then we also did another set of swatches that had our 11s but added amplifiers to them so that we could see what kind of neutralization it could do. And then lastly, we took our 11s and then we put a lot of amplifier in it so we could see how we could make pastels while we were lifting up those colors. Okay, type in a 1 if that all made sense. Awesome. So on level 7 or higher, we recommend you start with an O7, a little bit of O7 amplifier to neutralize any unwanted yellowy orange that's left in the hair. Okay. Um, really simple. We have a sheet that shows you the highlighting formula that you guys can see online. Totally awesome. You just follow that at first, and then you start to tinker. Remember, the best way for any of the formulations that we give you is to do it exactly the way it says on the sheet that we have for you at first until you get comfortable and really understand why we're telling you to do it that way. Because then you can ask yourself different questions like, well, I get it that that's why it's giving me neutral. What if I wanted a little more red in there? What could I do to add red to it? And it really comes down to knowing how to ask yourself the right questions because all of you guys are really, really talented stylists, right? Your work speaks for itself. So at the end of the day, um, inside, you guys already know what to do. You just have to know what question to ask yourself to make sure you're doing what you need to do to get the outcome that you want. Okay. Um, now, there's a couple ways, like we talked about it, using the same tonal value amplifier as the tonal value of the color that you're going to use. That's probably going to be the first way you're going to be using it. So in this example, like you're using a 4.6 color and you want it to be a little bit more red, so you add some 66 to it, right? That's probably going to be the first way you're going to use the amplifiers as an amplifier, right? Second way you're going to use an amplifier, and like I said, don't be worried, just do exactly what it says on the paper, is adding some amplifier to your 11 series to tone as you lift, right? How many of you guys think it's going to save you guys a lot of time if if your color is going to tone while it's lifting? Type in a 1 if you think that'll save you some time. It will do a lot. And I know that like for a lot of situations, it's still nice to put a finish on the end, right? And so you can definitely sign up for our toning and semi-permanent, demi-permanent formulations class that we'll have online too, because that'll show you how to do that. Because it's nice to put a finish on there. We also have clear glosses that you can use. So if your tonal value is really nice on your finish and you feel like you don't need to tone, you can still put a finish on it with a clear that's going to help to seal it in. So hopefully that's something that you guys take advantage of as well. Now, the percentage of or how much you use of color as opposed to how much you use of amplifier really makes a difference, right? So if you look at this first formula up there, if I use 1.5 ounces of 6.6, that's a level 6 red, and I add a half an ounce of a 66 amplifier, that's an intense red amplifier, right? Basically what I'm doing is making a level 6 that is really red. Okay, that's pretty basic. Now, that is not the same if I flip that amount around. If I only use a half an ounce of 6.6 and an ounce and a half of 66, what happens is I don't have any base color in there. Because you remember, the amplifiers are pure tonal value. They have no base level. So amplifiers on their own, they're not going to cover anything. All they're going to do is add tonal value. So where in my first formula, I had a lot of bass and a little amplifier, I'm going to get coverage, I'm going to get depth, and I'm going to get tone. In my second formula, the bottom formula, I have almost no base level in there, right? So I'm not going to get any coverage with that, but I have a lot of tonal value. So it's going to give me a lot of tone. Um, so not necessarily in this exact proportion, but let's say you wanted to make like a pinkish, uh, a pinkish color that you can put on a client that you've already pre-lightened with bleach, right? This is the type of formula that you would use where you still have a little bit of base level, but you have mostly tone, so it's going to be almost like a see-through color. Type in a 1 if that makes sense. And now for some of you guys, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question. After we had our class, uh, oh, great. Well, Allison already answered my question here. Um, After we did our class last time, uh, how many of you guys went back and tried to make some custom color or pastel? Type in a 1 if you did or a 2 if you didn't. Awesome, excellent. Hopefully all those experiments came out well. And so just learning more and more about the proportions will help you guys to make really, really cool stuff. So when it comes to learning color, sometimes when you see so many bottles and numbers up there, it gets kind of confusing. I totally understand. And I think that that's why for me, like the best thing that I can do, and one of my favorite things to do, is to actually take color and mix it and see what I get. And I start to pay attention to what exactly it is I'm using, and then it makes it so that it makes sense, right? Um, I also like math a lot. So by looking at just the numbers, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to make something. So for example, in this breakdown that's here, in this breakdown right here, uh, 4.3 is a level 4 gold. I know that, right? Because I know it's 4.3 is a level 4 gold. But really, what that means is that I can make 4.3 if I didn't have it. Let's say I was out of stock on it. I can make it if I had a 4 neutral and some 33 amplifier. it should work, right? And that's what I mean by math, is that at the end of the day, that should work, right? So if I do that and I know what these little colors are, then I can make anything, because I can make a 4 purple, I can make a 4 red, uh, I can make a 4 green, I can make anything I want by just knowing how to add these things together. So it's real simple math, but it makes it a lot easier for me to understand. Okay, um, so I told you guys I like purple, or shades of purple and mahoganies right now. So 4.65, right, should be some 4.6 and some 4.5. That should that should give me that, right? But if I start to look at the how these things are made too, I could even break it down even more. And don't get too excited here, Laura. This is just an example here. 4.65 can also be made using 4.6, 33, which is gold, 22, which is violet, and 66, which is red. Because my 4.5 is a 5 mahogany, is a level 4 mahogany, right? Point 5 is mahogany, and mahogany is made up of the yellow, the violet, and the red. So once you start breaking it down, you can start breaking down so many things. Now, if I have a 4.65, I have it in stock, right? I'm going to use it on somebody, but I want to make it more violet. I can add 22, and I know what it's going to do. It's going to make it more violet. Um, so I think you guys have probably heard this before. Like, I look at color formulation kind of like cooking, right? Um, Depending on what you add together, you can either make something that tastes really good or something that tastes really horrible, right? It's the same thing with like the hair color. If you're trying to make something that looks a certain way based on how your recipe is of the colors that you use, right? So instead of salt and pepper and garlic and all that, you're using the different colors to make whatever it is that you want to make. And sometimes if you look at it that way, it makes it a little bit less scary uh, as to what you're trying to make. And if you practice with the swatches like I'm asking you guys to do, you will get so good at cooking up a beautiful hair color that no one else is going to be able to copy on your client. I mean, this is the key to personalizing your hair color formulations. And that's really the added value that you can have for your customer, and that will have your customer get you more customers. It's that personalization aspect. Now, getting back to the beginning, right? All goes back to basics. Blue, red, and yellow is going to make brown. It's always going to do it. Orange, purple, and green mixed together in equal proportions is always going to make brown. So by not making them equal proportions, you can make other colors. So that's the thing. You got to understand the basic, right? 1 part yellow, 1 part blue, and 1 part red is going to give me brown. But now if I vary how much is in there, it's going to give me other colors, and colors that no color manufacturer is going to be able to make, because they're going to come from inside you, from the creations that you want to do. Type in a 1 if that makes sense, and type in a 5 if that sounds exciting. Awesome. I'm glad I'm not the only one excited by that. Excellent. Excellent. So, so remember, you're making brown and then you're adding tones, right? So let's take a look at this, and we're getting close to the end here, guys. How many of you guys have liked today's presentation? Type in a 1 if you've liked it, and then type in a 5 if you think that it's been helpful. Excellent. Now, if you look at this, how many of you guys have? If you have Pinterest, type in a 1. I'm sure you guys know there are a lot of hair color boards on Pinterest. And what we like to do is, look around and see some of the awesome work that people are doing, because there are stylists out there doing amazing stuff, right? And Pinterest is a great way to find these pictures and then be able to kind of see, okay, figure out for yourself, okay, how can I do that using my hair color? So the benefits are going to be that it's going to be a lot gentler on the hair, that it's going to make the hair look healthier, and it's going to make me a better colorist because I'll be able to do all these things. So basically, what we did in this last class that we had last week here in California at Mass Day, and if you guys ever get a chance to come out to LA, let us know. We'll plan a class. If you guys want to plan a salon class out here, it's a totally awesome experience to be here, because not only do you get to hang out with us, but you also get to learn and see how everything is made. You get to play with everything right there, and you get to visit our lab, all of that kind of stuff. Type in a one if you'd like to come out and hang out with us. So if you look at this model, so we took this model and we said, okay, how can we make these formulas? And each stylist that was there came up with their own interpretation of how they were going to make these colors, right? Um, the formulas I put up here are my formulas. Now, one of the things that you want to remember, okay, uh, personal preference. Once you start knowing exactly what you're doing with this stuff, so hopefully, um, yes, we will have questions when we are done, or you can type them in now, Leanne, as well. Um, Now, one of the things that you will notice is uh, I like to do a lot of things at once. Uh, Not just in hair color, but like in life. I like to like do a lot of things all at once. Um, so I'm always trying to figure out, okay, what two things can I do together that will make sense and still work? Okay. One of the things that I like to do is I like to play with using high volumes of peroxide in my formulas so that I can try and use the underlying pigment that is going to come out of the hair, right? So, um, for example, I told you guys I like math and I like logic, right? So logically, I know that if I lift somebody's hair, there should be underlying pigment there, right? So if that's the case, why not use it? And so for this experiment, what I did for mine is I used higher volumes of peroxide than you may normally use, because I wanted to see, can I get that kind of vibrancy, that kind of tone, and that kind of shine with my formula and the underlying pigment that's in there. Now, so you guys all know Antonio. Antonio was there at that class with us, and his was different because he wanted to get a different kind of effect. So what he did is he actually pre-lightened all of his swatches beforehand with the 11-2s, got them as uh, got them as light as possible, and then dyed over them with the formulas that he wanted. Um, Now, what that meant, and this is the difference between the two of our formulas, right? His formula looked more exact to the picture than my formulas did. But my formulas were still in the ballpark, and I thought good enough, and I did it in one step. So depending on what you want to do, if you're trying to do exact match, right, or if you're trying to do pastels, definitely the better way is to pre-lighten and then use your formulations to do it, right? Um, but if you are, experimenting and there's a margin of, you can kind of have a margin in there where you can have different tones and use the underlying pigment, you can do it in one step as well. Um, so, Leanne, and that's a good question. In some situations, right, uh, and in some situations, you still need to use bleach, right? Because especially if you're going to do another process with it, because the lighter that you get the hair, the more that second process is going to come out the exact way that you want it. So, for example, like we were trying to figure out how to do pastel colors, kind of like the formula that I'm showing you here. It just would have been higher numbers, right? Um, but the issue that I ran into in trying to do that is that I never got the hair light enough so that the pastel was the exact color pastel that I wanted to do. So, Antonio can get those pastel colors perfectly because he'll pre-lighten that hair. And he's actually really good with the 11 series. So he can get that hair pretty light, and he uses the amplifiers really well, so he can tone it while he's lifting so that you get the neutral tone as opposed to any yellow still in the hair. And in certain situations, especially for someone who's dark and has a lot of underlying pigment, if you did it with just color and developer or color and 60 volume, you may have to double process that in order to get it to a place where you could do your other process. So, for the gentleness of the hair or gentleness to the hair, it's better to do it without bleach. For some of the things though that you guys want to do, bleach is still necessary. Hopefully that makes sense to that question. Type in a one if that's good. Um, so now, but looking at this formula that we have here, right? I used a 4.65, which is a 4 mahogany, and I added 22, which was a violet amplifier, right? And I used 30 volume because I wanted to get that underlying pigment. And then I used 5.67 and 22 with 60 volume to get the lighter color because I wanted to get a lot of lift, okay? And as you can see, this is the swatch while it's coloring, right? And you can see the color that we made there. That's the 5.67 with the 22 and the 60, right? It's going to come out really, really close to that color. And it's kind of hard to see, but the top of the little thing above the tape, you can see what we started out with, right? But again, remember, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do it. I'm trying not necessarily like cheat is not the right word, but I'm trying to do it all at once. I'm trying to like get it done. And so that's what I like to try and do. In a salon situation, this would be something that would work great on some of your clients, right? Um, but if you were trying to go for something that was more like a pastel color, you wouldn't want to do it this way because you wouldn't be able to get enough lift. Type in one if that makes sense. And then somebody else did, they were trying to get a similar color that I was trying to do, and their formula, I called it the backup formula, because they did the reason why this came up is because they didn't think my formula would work at all. So what they did is they used 4.6, 22, and 66 plus 30 volume, and you can kind of see it down in the right hand corner there. But this is where we were talking about earlier. There are multiple ways to get to the same place, right? So feel comfortable and feel free to use your own creativity to get to that same place because you're going to get there. And if you make a mistake and it doesn't come out to where it is, it's not really a throwaway. It's just a different color that you made that might work great on somebody else. Yeah, I think that, again, we've tried to make a lightener for a lot of years, and we haven't made one that we feel would give the hair the integrity that we would want it to have. I mean, you guys know from using the hair color, Like when you use our hair color, that hair is super healthy. And it's very difficult to do that with bleach. There are a lot of good bleaches out there that you can try. Um, I would say for certain things, you would still have to use lightener. And that's fine in a sense because you want to remember that at the end of the day, your client is going to come to you and ask you for a specific thing. And you have to try and get them there uh, the gentlest way that you possibly can. But if your client is saying, I want X, and the only way to get them to X is to use a lightener, you'll have to use a lightener. Cool. As you can see in this as well, on the top left of that little picture with all the swatches, you'll see that there's something that's green, something that's blue, and something that's violet, and then something that's blonde. What we did was we used high amounts of high amounts of amplifier and little amounts of 11.2 in those. And what we got is we were able to make a really nice green color, a really deep blue color. So a little bit different from Jennifer's blue. It was actually uh, more vibrant blue, like very, very deep, and then a really nice violet. And then what we also did was we used 11.23 and we added um, the 22 amplifier to the 11.23, and we were able to make a rose colored as well. That kind of looked like a rose pastel, but that one was cool because it was able to be done in one step as well. So now, as we start to close out, you know, how long will these colors last, right? And this goes to your earlier question about longevity, Allison. The more base color is in there, the longer it's going to last. The the lower amount of base color and more amplifiers in there, the more you're making something that isn't meant to last, right? Because you're not making something to cover. You're making something more that's more of a fashion thing that you can always retouch. Um, But other things that are going to play into how long color lasts, you want to pay attention to the porosity of the hair, the dryness, um, how long you have it on the hair, right? So you can, if you don't want it to last that long, you can modify the timing so that it doesn't last as long. Shampoo habits and what they use as a shampoo is at home is going to make a difference, and the darkness of the color that you pick, and the type of formula. Okay, um, everything that we talked about today, right? You can make as a semi-permanent or a demi-permanent too, just by switching the amounts of the formulations that you use. And when we get into one of the follow-up classes where we talk about formulations, like semis, demis, and toners and glazes and glosses and things, you'll see how you could take this stuff and turn it into that. And so hopefully you guys like the way that we're building up these classes, because there's definitely a lot of things that you guys can do. Um, Remember that depending on your customer, it's going to determine what your formula is all about. And stay tuned again because we'll have some more advanced color formulations coming up that will be that'll help take this process even to an even uh, bigger level. So we'll stop here and hopefully type in a one if you thought this was a beneficial class for you guys and if you liked it. Awesome. You guys will get a survey when I close this out. You guys will get a survey. Please take the time. It'll take about less than a minute to answer a couple of questions about it. And if you have suggestions for us, hopefully you guys can type those in as well. And then to close this out, if you guys have any questions. We'd be happy to answer them real quick. So you can go ahead and type your question into the chat. I'll read the question so that everybody can hear it, and then we'll go ahead and answer. So any questions, guys? Cool. If there are no questions, go ahead. If you don't have a question, type a 2 into your into the uh, into the chat box. Awesome. That helps me to think that hopefully you guys had a good experience and a good time. Uh, Laura, great questions today, and I will make sure that we email out and post up on Facebook later today the tint back charts and some of the other charts that we talked about today. Also, for you guys, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be posted on Facebook as well as on massdayhaircolor.com in the stylist education area. So you can always go back and if there's something on the color math or something on how much amplifier to put in, you can really just jump to that section in the YouTube video and get a refresher as well. How many of you guys are going to save some hair and do some custom formulas for me? Type in a 1 if you're going to do that. Cool. And do me a favor, guys. If you guys can do this, it would be super awesome. When you guys do that, uh, snap a picture of the swatch before, snap a picture of what you get in the end, and then post those up to our Facebook page along with the formula that you used. Okay? And it doesn't matter whether you think it's good or not good, someone will love it, right? I made a color that I thought, oh man, it looks really bad. And it was the one that somebody else picked out of my swatches that they thought was awesome. So you never know what people are going to like. And remember, every customer is a different person, so they have different tastes. So there's never, ever a wrong formula. All right. So if you guys can do that for us, that would be great. Um, Thank you for joining us today. Do me a favor, if my email is eric@massday.com. If you guys ever need anything, please feel free to email me directly, and I'll be happy to get you guys any information you can. So thank you again for joining us. Enjoy the end of summer, and hopefully we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks for another webinar.